Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is the English translation of the Majlis of Hazrat Maulana Qamar Uzzaman Saheb Damat Barakatuhum, which took place on Monday, the 24th of Zulhijjah 1445, the English date 1st of July 2024. Hazrat Wala is saying that Tawheed, or speaking about Tawheed ki Shan-e Ali, the great maqam, status and position of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahib is saying that I am speaking to you about my own incident, that in the very start I was alone. Then one person came, the next one came, and then the third one came. Like that, there many people started coming and gathering, and I did not stay, I was not alone anymore. From this year, I'm actually trying to tell you कि मुवाहिद इब्तिदा में तन्हा नहीं होता, that the one who truly believes in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is never alone. He is not alone. Allah Ta'ala के सिवा उसका कोई नहीं होता है. Besides Allah, okay. So let me just say that part again there. That muwahid ibtiha mein tanha hota hai. That the one who proclaims the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the start he is alone. In the start he is alone. And besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has no one. Thereafter, many people then start turning towards him. After that, the hal and the condition of his tawheed still remains the same, that he understands himself to be alone, even though he is not alone. However, tawheed is filled into his heart to such an extent that his heart turns to no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am saying this to you because the people who start doing the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, initially they are alone. However, in the end, they are not alone. And all of this here happens and comes about because of them doing work. So, wahidullah, proclaim the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Adopt, choose tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِنَّ التَّوْحِيدَ رَأْسُ الطَّاعَاتِ, because the root and the essence of all types of obedience is nothing other than that of Tawheed. Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahib's matter was very, very amazing in the very start. He would come and then stay at a certain place, and early next morning in the Fajr Salat, people would then come to meet him, but he was not there then. He would leave and go away. Baag mein lagta nahi, sahra se ghabrata hai dil. What to do? I don't feel right when I'm sitting in the gardens. And when I'm taken to the open lands and to the open fields, into the desert place, then I start feeling anxious and restless. You put me here, I'm restless. You put me there, I'm not right. Ab kahan le jaake bete aise diwane ko? Now what do you do with someone who is in this type of a condition? Where do you take him and put him? The Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the start, his condition was also such. He was one, he was alone. Now this silsila, this people that I'm seeing sitting in front of me, Hazrat Wala is saying, is the silsila of no one else other than that of Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahib. But all of this here comes about by doing work. You would have to do something. और काम तो करने ही से होगा. Work will come into play, everything will fall into place by doing work. कामयाबी तो काम से होगी, न कि हुस्न कलाम से होगी, जिक्र के इल्तिज़ाम से होगी, फिक्र के इह्तिमाम से होगी. Success will come about by you doing something. You would have to do the work. Not just by merely sweet talks or just sitting there idle. No. It will come about when you have fikr for your islah and you are punctual with your dhikr. So if you don't do anything, how would people listen? And how would then that group and Jamaat be prepared? So the people who start the work in the start, they are alone. Thereafter, फिर रफ्ता रफ्ता उसका काम आगे बढ़ता है, slowly, drop by drop, step by step, his work then starts expanding. And a group of people then are prepared and created who start listening then to his talks. When a person does the work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it can't be that he would then remain alone. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created seekers, the seekers for him in every time and era. The world is never ever empty of people who are seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, believers in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believers of the Quran, believers of the Hadith, believing in the believers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will remain in every era and age. And such people will then start following him. Allah ta'ala will start sending them to him. So I am saying, whichever great personalities have passed, all of them were seekers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were not seekers of fame. Jah ke talib nahi the. Because the one who is a seeker of name and fame can never ever be a seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That person who chooses deen for the sake of name and fame, then in actual fact, what talib ilahi nahi, he is not the seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because talib jah, talib ilahi nahi hota. The seeker of name and fame can never ever be the seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Saheb is saying in this article, Hazrat Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi rahimahullah say yahi suna, and this is what I have learned and heard from Hazrat Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi. Hazrat Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanvi, regarding riya, show and ostentation, he makes naqal and relates the ibarat of Imam Ghazali, Talabul jah biwasitatil ibadat. That what is riya, what is the show and ostentation? It is to seek name and fame by means of ibadat. And this ostentation, the show, is actually the minor type and form of shirk and ascribing partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has mentioned, Inna yasir al-riya'i shirkun, that the slightest form and type and amount of riya will constitute shirk and ascribing partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who are true seekers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they abandon ostentation, show, and seeking name and fame. And they do not seek status in the eyes of the makhluk. However, their shan is actually this, that they do not hope to please the people. Rather, उनके लिए तो बस ये काफ़ी है कि वो हक़ ताला के पसंदीदा है. They look at this year, that is it pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They choose and adopt Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah ta'ala on himself and on his own turns the attention of the people then to him. And it is because of the barakat of this Tawheed they become successful here in this dunya and in the akhirat. I actually trying with all of this here, trying to impress on your mind that by means of all of this here we have yaqeen now and conviction in the nusus and in the text. That initially we taught ourselves to be alone, and then we did not remain alone. Now wherever we go, people come, 10, 20 people come. By this year, I have gained conviction that muwahhid tanha nahi rehta, the one who truly has deeply embedded in his heart Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he never remains alone. And by this whole discussion, my objective is to inspire you about this year, that if you choose deen, then it is greatly possible that people will oppose you in the start. But regarding this opposition, do not become restless, because in the end you would become successful. And those who are not with you in the start and they are opposing you, in the end those people will be with you. And by means of those people who opposed you, Allah Ta'ala will then help you. And this is Adatullah yuhi jari hai. This is actually the pattern, the sunnat, the adat, the habit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now look at the waqi'ah and the incident of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam, which is so full of lesson and admonition, nasihat, advice. Allah Ta'ala says regarding Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam, وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And like that, we gave authority to Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam here on the land. يَتَبَوَّأُ مِنْهَا حَيْثُ يَشَاءُ. He could stay wherever he wanted. The matlab of all of this here is that whether it was that time there when Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam was in the well, or then after that he was under the Misr of Egypt, and then he was in the jail, and thereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him on the throne of Egypt. नुसीबु बिरहमतिना मन नशा वला नुदीउ अजर अलमुहसिनीन, यानी हम जिस पर चाहे अपनी इनायत मुतवज्जिह कर दे. Upon whomsoever we wish to put our grace and our rahmat, we do so, and we do not let go to waste the reward of the doers of good. Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salatu wassalam was living in a village in the rural areas, and because of the mercilessness of the brothers, he landed up in the well. However, that was the very reason of his advancement and his progress. Initially, Allah Ta'ala made him the minister of Egypt, and thereafter Allah Ta'ala made him the king of Egypt. nusibu bi rahmatina man nasha. Whomsoever we wish to bestow a portion of our rahmat to, we do so. So this is become talib, the seekers of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that my Allah must become pleased. La ilaha illallah. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah. Therefore, it is for this reason Hazrat Haji Imdadullah Sahib used to say, sit close to the wall so that wasa'id kam ho jaye. Thus, there will be less distractions. Yaksui zaruri hai, and this type of solitude and just you alone and Allah, this is actually necessary. Gar nakhaste dad nadade khast. If Allah Ta'ala did not want to give you something, then in the very first place He would have not created some talab, this thirst, enthusiasm and quest in your heart. This mere fact that He has created talab in you actually means that He wants to give you something. So, Hazrat Maulana Shah Wasiullah Sahab, as we were saying, कि बाग में लगता नहीं, सहरा से घबराता है जी, घबराता है दिल. अब कहाँ ले जाके बेहते इसे दीवाने को? People came to meet him in the morning, but by that time he had all left already. So listening to these talks is also a great ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our work is such that whatever we do, we're doing this or that or the other, we are being rewarded all the time. Now let us make dua. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم بحرمة سيد النبي الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم.